let's kick it off with the Penn State Nittany Lions, up to 11-point favorites in the Fiesta Bowl against the Boise State Broncos, total of 53.5. To me, Austin, it's not just strength of schedule discrepancy for Astringenti and this Boise State offense. Mattson, the Broncos quarterback, facing the best defense he has gone up against all season. And Boise State, if you look at their strength of schedule, they rank 86. So that's, for context, behind Notre Dame and behind Indiana, if you want to talk about another college football playoff team that has exited, and another Big Ten team, for that matter. Penn State, top 5 team, mainly on the defensive side of the ball, depending on how many flowers you want to give Drew Aller. And you look at Mattson's profile this season from a numbers standpoint, 22 touchdown passes. He's only taken 10 sacks, but this is the best defensive front, not only best defense he's gone up against. So how do you handicap this matchup, and any bets for you?
Yeah, so it's always tough when you get into, the power conference team versus non-power. And I know Boise's been that giant killer through their, history the last 10, 15 years. But I always have to take a step back and look at the trench play. That's where I want to start. And it's, do I think that Boise State can hang in it? And looking at the SMU game, not that SMU, they're technically a power team, but they just came from a non-power conference. They were fine for the first half against Penn State, but the second half, their offensive line started getting overwhelmed. And that's my concern here with Boise is no matter how Penn State's offense plays in this game, can they generate enough? Definitely if they get into any passing downs. Is that where are they gonna be able to have any success when Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton are pinning their ears back and trying to rush the passer there? So I don't love the trench matchup here for Boise. Now, they have a game breaker in Genti. Everybody knows that. He's most likely going to be the first running back taken in the draft. I just think the whole game plan for Penn State is going to be, do not let him, make sure you tackle him because he's amazing at forcing missed tackles, but cannot let him get loose for those 50-plus yard runs that he's been so good at. So my number for this game is right on market. I make it 11, but I think that if I'm going to get involved in this game, I think it really comes down to, I think Penn State on an alternate line is something that I think in the get above 14, maybe a 14.5 or even into 17 range. I think we could see a similar output in the SMU game where the second half Penn State really puts their kind of squeezes out too much potential of with their athletes and everything to where Boise just can't hold on. So no straight up game, but if I had to, I'll be searching tomorrow when this game kicks off. I'll be looking at the alternate markets for Penn State.
Well, I'll do it for you right now as we record on Monday at Bet365, plus 155 for minus 16.5. If you want to go under 21, plus 240, so minus 20.5. On the point spread, under 24, so minus 23.5, plus 320. Any of those stand out where you might take a dabble?
Yeah, I probably would stay close to that 16.5. Would you say 155?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sticks out to me. I think I'd rather you're looking at, I know that obviously 14 is key if you want to say that it's a key number. But when you get into these games that are potentially, double digit blowout, there's some variance involved. And I think a lot of times the variance shakes towards the more talented team and there's just not enough juice. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they pull Genti if it's a blowout, but I do think it's one of those things where if it becomes a blowout, I don't know if there's a lot of answers for Boise against Penn State. So I think 11, you're pretty much hoping they win by 14 anyway. I think getting that 16.5 at plus 155 probably has a little bit of value there.
All right, and be sure to check out our betting columns up at thelines.com for all the latest on the betting odds for Boise State and Penn State. If we look ahead here in the college football playoff, if we want to take a look at futures, first and foremost, I know we discussed this a little bit off air, that to you and I, not really a ton of value in betting on any of these teams at this point. But in terms of liability for the book, it's worked out well with the format. Boise State, they could take some bets there at 80-1, and it'll kind of even out the overall handle, just because the liability, maybe then veering toward Ohio State, Oregon, etc. At this point, we'll get into that big matchup, a rematch of the Week 6 game later on in the show. But to you, I guess just to reiterate, no value on the futures betting market, and kind of siding with me with the notion that the setup definitely benefits the book.
Yeah, I don't really love any of the prices. Obviously shop around and you can maybe find an off price, but there's only 8 teams left, so that's not going to happen, right? Like it's really hard to pick off any bad prices. So I'm with, if I had to, like, Oregon is semi interesting to me, but like, again, because of the format, they play Ohio State, and like that could be a one shot. Oh, okay, they lose a close game against Ohio State, even though if you think they're one of the 2 best teams in the country, they're done before the semifinals. So, yeah, Oregon's there. I still think Penn State is probably the most interesting if we want to go further down the board. Like, I don't think Texas or Ohio State has some value. Penn State's kind of close because, again, they're a double-digit favorite, like I just mentioned. I think they can win by margin. And then they're getting a Notre Dame team that I don't think is going to be like favored over Penn State. I think that game will be probably pretty close to a coin flip. And then Georgia, I don't know, what are we getting out of their offense? We'll go into to that a little bit later when we talk that game. But I think it's Oregon or Penn State. I think those are the two teams that I'd be targeting in the futures market, just because I think Oregon is pretty good. Their offense is, I'd say, near unstoppable. And then Penn State just has a pretty favorable draw to the championship game.
Oregon plus 400 at Bet365. Penn State right behind them at plus 475. So 4 shortest odds. It is interesting to note that Oregon was, at some books, the favorite, consensus favorite, entering the college football playoff right around plus 330. Now plus 400. So you're getting even better odds on Oregon if you like the Ducks at that number. And that's because Oregon was a look-ahead favorite against Ohio State, and then the line flipped to Ohio State, right now below the key number of 3. And we'll touch on that rematch later on in the show. But hypothetical lines, you brought up the potential matchup between Penn State and Notre Dame in the semifinal. And we'll handicap Georgia and Notre Dame last year on the show. But on the look-ahead number for Bet365 Sportsbook, and just note for any bettors out there that are looking to bet at Bet365, the wager would be void if the matchup doesn't occur. But Notre Dame actually a 1.5 point favorite against Penn State on the look ahead. Does that surprise you at all, or just because it's around a pick? Not really.
Yeah, not a ton. When you're around a pick, it's not super, not a ton of money or a ton of influence in the market to go to, even 1.5 there. So I do find it a little bit interesting that, if we're implying that there, Georgia would be, a little bit more of a favorite there, depending on where you're shopping, as well as a hypothetical. But yeah, I think Notre Dame and Penn State are kind of similar in that both strong defenses who have really, have done a good job, all year long, pretty much. And then your offense is kind of like, they've shown some moments, but they, a little bit of inconsistency problem. My model, my numbers see that as pretty much a coin flip. So I'm not rushing to the door to bet Penn State at plus 1.5 there, because that's not a ton of value. But if that matchup does occur and there's any early money on the Irish, maybe a Penn State money line, or even if it would get up to a field goal, I'd be all over that.